All right, Mark Karhoff, welcome back to the PSM podcast. I think you are a two-time guest now.
Actually, it might be three. So yeah, thanks, Shabbir.
All right. Well, we wanted to talk about DSCSA. There's a lot happening. This year has been very exciting. But let's start with the basics, which is, can you sort of explain to us what Tencount is and what your company does?
Sure. Thanks, Shabbir. Glad to be here. We're big fans of PSM and appreciate all that you're doing to help keep the supply chain safe. We've learned a lot from all the things that you post, and it's really helped kind of really add a story to the work that we're doing. So we appreciate everything you guys do. So Tencount Consulting, we're a supply chain consulting company. By background, we focus heavily on the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. We worked a lot with manufacturers early on. Moved down the supply chain and work with distributors, pharmacies, and even some regulatory types.
Tell me, where would you go to learn more about DSCSA if you want to dive into the pool and not necessarily into the 12-foot deep end? What's your most gentle way to get up to speed on this topic? Because, I mean, for a lot of dispensers, small dispensers, pharmacy techs, there's a lot of people that need to know how the system works now.
Yeah, I would say, definitely there's the FDA, DSCSA website. There, GS1 has a technical website, GS1 US, for more standards. But for most people, they're probably going to need some kind of training to give them an overview. We created a platform called DSCSA learningcart.com. It's really kind of meant to give that overview approach and really actionable, steps that they should take. In fact, anybody can log in and take the 5-minute course for free. Let us know what they think.
Yeah, I took the first course. I really liked it, actually. I got the quiz perfect, but that was not surprising. But I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is great. I think PSM will start recommending that people take this because it's such a good overview of how the system works. So coming in November, the small dispenser exception ends, which for DSCSA, which I think, let me translate to English, which means that if you're a small pharmacy or a medspa or some other organization that is dispensing medicine, you will need to be compliant with all of the portions of the law that were delayed as the system rolled out over a little over a decade. What do people need to be thinking about if they fall into that small dispenser category of a doctor's office or a med spa or a small pharmacy?
Yeah, so a lot of it will depend on scenarios, but generally, they're going to need to make sure that they're receiving data from their suppliers. So if you're a dispenser, you should be getting data from your distributor or your secondary distributor. They're required to provide it electronically at this point. So they should be going through the process of basically making sure they can store that data. A lot of entities are using their wholesalers to actually store that data, so they can contract with a partner to keep the data for them accessible if they ever get audited.
Where are you starting to see enforcement of people failing their obligations under the Drug Supply Chain Security Act?
Yeah, I would say early on we were seeing kind of for cause. So if there was an active investigation or some kind of complaint came into either FDAs or states, they may use that to start, enforcing DSCSA. But I'd say generally right now what we're seeing is a heavy push on manufacturers. We're seeing FDA has added this remote inspection approach, which has really helped, I think, on international sites especially. We've heard of a lot of plants that'll get calls to say, hey, we're going to be doing the DSCSA inspection tomorrow. Be ready to answer questions. We're also seeing the FDA recently did a pilot to kind of move to more like short iteration inspections for like low risk sites and smaller sites and such. And then we are seeing full blown GMP inspections where they're asking DSCSA questions, and it's becoming pretty normal now. Distributors, probably more states, and the accreditors are starting to include DSCSA questions. And then a little bit on the pharmacy side, but I expect that to keep expanding.
So this is actually kind of amazing to me, and I'm a big cheerleader for FDA as a regulator. I would rather live in this country with our FDA than any other country, to be honest. So the FDA is actually doing a remote inspection. So if you've got a factory in another country and you're making medicines and packaging them and then putting the unique serial number on them, that just because your factory is in India or China does not put you out of the long arm a safety regulation of the FDA. They will do a remote inspection, ask for documents, presumably make you take pictures of things that are happening and show them your process to show that you're compliant.
Yes, I've even heard in some cases they may ask you to carry a camera around, like to carry the PC around to show that you're live and you're actually in the site and those kind of things. Yeah, I definitely say kudos to the FDA. I think the whole COVID thing, I think, sort of really spurred them into motion, and I think they got through some red tape to be able to do this because it's always inspections overseas have always been a challenge because of the international laws and basically, getting a sponsor to go into a country and things like that can sometimes tip off when an inspection is going to happen. I think this new approach definitely helped with that because at any moment they could theoretically set up a call to start inspecting.
That's just so great. I'm so excited about just seeing them spread their wings and find more ways to use technology and just put more eyes on more parts of the supply chain to keep all of us safe. I just think it's great.
Yeah, I definitely say, it is a tough job. I know I've gotten to know people from the FDA better over the years, and I really respect what they do. It is a public service job. In some ways, it's a thankless job, but it is critical. And DSCSA will not really happen fully unless we continue to have those good people at the FDA that are putting in the time and effort to actually make sure it's enforced.
So honestly, all anyone has been talking about for months is the Texas medspa that the FDA inspected and then wrote up with a warning. And it was super exciting because it's a small dispenser and it shows that not just pharmacists have to be compliant, which is the law. There is more people than just pharmacies that have to be compliant with the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. Give me a crash course in what happened in Texas. What did the FDA write up? What was the consequence there?
Sure. So I think one of the common misunderstandings with DSCSA is that it only applies to pure pharmacies. And the reality is it applies to anybody that dispenses medicine. Essentially, what happened was the FDA was following an active investigation. I think they had gotten some complaints. I don't know exactly what the source of it was. Like, I don't know what they divulged, but I think the heart of it was when they actually went into inspection, they found product that was not serialized, that was clearly outside of the legitimate supply chain. They didn't see processes showing that they were checking for licensure from their suppliers. And they actually started looking at the transaction purchasing records from this entity and started seeing that they did not have the data to line up, or the records to line up that they were actually buying legitimate products in the same quantities that they were selling it. So even though the transaction is exempt, there still is the capability of them looking into fraudulent activity and dealing in counterfeit medicine when they're in there. And then CSA starts to get them if they need to actually hold people accountable for not these two key aspects.
One of the things that I loved about that letter or about that inspection is that they cited them for buying product that was not serialized. And in essence, what they had bought was a somewhat unlabeled vial. And I thought there's some complexity around understanding your compliance, but if it needs a serial number and it doesn't have one, that seems like one that you can do a compliance check without having to have a lot of training first.
It's so true. And I guess one of the news flashes is your local neighborhood Botox party probably falls under DSCSA. So I guess there's some comfort in that in terms of it's regulated, but I think it does really highlight that, when we get into these areas, even the word spa, and I talk to a lot of regulators about that word med spa, it's like they're distributing medicine. So the spa word is a little misleading. So you should treat them like you would any supplier of drugs, for any pharmacy. You should say, how do I know that they have processes and that they're actually handling it? I think one important thing it does is it shows that the states actually have a lot of capabilities to enforce this as well. I think the FDA essentially has laid out a blueprint for any state to be able to say every med spa in my state only transacting in serialized product. Are they checking authorized trading partners? And the same is true for GLP-1s or any other areas where you've got medicine that may or may not be legitimate in the areas that are high risk.
So this letter was huge. I think a lot of people read this warning letter, and warning letters sometimes are crazy popular amongst drug safety, patient safety advocates. This one got read a lot. But if you're not a med spa, does this have implications beyond that if you're another kind of player?
Yeah, I think it's important for anybody that's distributing medicine in any way to at least understand the basics of DSCSA. So again, you have to comply with the transacting only in serialized medicine and checking that your partners are authorized trading partners. And I think when you get into the law and look at the exemptions, that's the key thing is, does the exemptions apply to you? And are you acting as a distributor in terms of the law?
What are the exceptions? Like we talked about, and pretty much anybody who's in the business of dispensing medicine needs to be compliant and needs to pay attention to this warning letter. What are the people who have exceptions from being a dispenser that we should understand?
Sure. So I think this is an area, obviously talk to your legal counsel, but the main part of this comes out of the law, and where it's 582 D5. And it says, notwithstanding any other provisions of the law, the requirements under paragraph 1 and 4 shall not apply to licensed healthcare practitioners authorized to prescribe or administer medicine under state law, or licensed individuals under the supervision or direction of such practitioners who dispense or administer product in the usual course of professional practice. So what does that mean? It means if you are administering drugs in any way, that you are potentially liable to follow at least part of the law, the part that is not exempt. If you are doing that, if you fall within the clinician, the practitioner, then you are exempt from certain parts, which is the verification and the tracing, and some of the more advanced data tracking requirements. So the key message is, if you're handling medicine, you need to know what DSCSA is and understand what applies or doesn't apply.
And just to be clear, I used to describe this when I would train people in CEs, that there's these obligations for dispensers, of which physicians in the office are one kind. And then these are the obligations for pharmacist dispensers, which have a couple of additional ones. As a non-pharmacist dispenser, you do not get a pass on buying products without serial numbers. You do not get a pass on buying from unlicensed wholesalers. All of that stuff, it still applies to you.
Yeah, I mean, I should definitely say that I don't feel like the FDA or the states are like actively going after doctors' offices or, even optometrists or dentists. But if you are transacting in things that are suspicious or may have challenges on it, they're definitely going to follow at risk or in active investigations. So in those scenarios, you're going to need to make sure that you're able to show that you're complying with the law, or at least understand what the law is. So I think that's the important thing, is it's not a free pass that you don't have to do anything. It's, you need to understand what it is generally and be able to speak to like the parts that you are doing, which are minimal for those practitioners.
Yeah, we just had a physician who was prosecuted at the federal level for distributing peptides, I think probably GLP-1s, to his coworkers in his hospital that were misbranded. They were not from an approved FDA registered manufacturer. They probably didn't have serial numbers, but they went ahead and prosecuted him. They could have prosecuted him on multiple ways, but they just prosecuted him for misbranded. That's a great example of where, like, if it doesn't have a serial number, but you're not a pharmacist, you're not off the hook. You still need to be distributing and dispensing medicine that's FDA approved.
Yeah. I'm sure I know there's a better way to say it, but basically ignorance is not an excuse, right? Like, you can't say I didn't know. It's like, well, you have some responsibility to make sure you understand what the law is and that you're complying with it, just like you do any other law that's required to administer any kind of medicine or healthcare. So it's important to know.
Everyone, including small dispensers, has an obligation under the DSCSA to apply a level of suspicion to product that they receive to see if it's suspect product. And if so, under one of the many conditions the FDA has in a guidance document, to quarantine it and verify it before giving it to patients. Do you think most people know that they have that obligation to apply a level of suspicion to product that fits some suspicious criteria? I feel like it's not well known, especially by small dispensers today.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a tough question. I think when it comes to the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, I think you're right. I don't think there's a general knowledge that there are parts that most practitioners have to follow. I do think, most practitioners, good practitioners, do this in the course of their normal work, right? I know my manufacturer clients get calls all the time from nurses and doctors and dentists, optometrists that are seeing something weird with a medicine and want to know about it. and they're the last line of defense before that product is used by a patient or injected. And so I think the key message is remembering you're the last line of defense. And even if you're not a pharmacist, you have an obligation to protect your patient. And hey, the industry has spent a lot of time, effort, and money, and just resources on making this law happen and to create this framework that could stop counterfeit medicine. But it only works if the people who are closest to the patient understand it and know what to watch for and know to ask questions. That's the biggest thing.
And a lot of that would come from training, which you might get on the Tencount training platform.
Yeah. Yeah. And we definitely try to use real world examples, throughout our training. We want to make sure this is really impactful and that people understand it. And, the law was passed because of situations that happen, real live examples of patients getting counterfeit medicine. And, I also agree that the US supply chain is the gold standard and it is the safest in the world. But, I like the airline industry's approach. One crash, one death is one too many, right? So anytime a patient gets sick or we put life in jeopardy of a patient, that we as a industry should work to eliminate those entirely.
So I want to ask everybody listening to or watching this, if you don't already know what an NDC code is, to go find a bottle of medicine in your closet. I happen to have some stunt bottles here that I use in my trainings. It's got an NDC code on it. I'm guessing that the bottle you're holding probably has a 10-digit NDC code, and that is not the future. So, Mark, give us the crash course in what's happening with NDC code.
Yeah, essentially, there would eventually come a time where the FDA ran out of what's called labeler codes, which is basically the code that's assigned to any packager or repackager. That they're about to run out of those numbers now. I think I think we're around 10 years if I remember right. It's eventually they're going to run out of numbers. And that means that theoretically no new medicine could be introduced, which would not be a good thing. So
Yeah.
basically what's happened is they have passed a rule rather that outlines moving to a 12-digit NDC number, which will make that code another digit longer, and allow them to have the time that they need for the long distant future to be able to produce numbers. Now, what does that mean to the whole supply chain? It's a very simple change on the surface. It's basically adding two digits to a number, but it is very similar to Y2K, I think, for anybody that remembers. Back when Y2K happened, it was just two digits and a date. What's the big deal? The reality is a lot of systems are dependent on what fields are in the data. So if you change something from a 10 digit to a 12 digit, it can basically stop the flow of data. And this data is impactful because it's the movement of medicine. It's also payments. It's revenue. It's all the way through the whole supply chain. And your CEO, your COO, your CFO, because this is a big financial challenge for a lot of organizations, should know that this is coming and understand what are we doing to address it. Because I'd say what we're seeing so far with this is the supply chain people, procurement, the people who dealt with Drug Supply Chain Security Act, they're sort of used to the fire drill and they're kind of trying to rally the troops. But this is a whole nother animal, especially when you start thinking about the financial and payment side of the house. And those worlds need to come together for this to really start understanding what the impact is and how to address it.
I remember I was on a call of DSCSA member company people, I guess I'd call them, pharmaceutical manufacturers who are experts in DSCSA, and they have a trade association call. And they were having this conversation about NDC 10 to 12. And I was thinking about, yeah, all those labels are going to have to be changed. And then I realized, oh no, it's more complicated than that, because along with the physical movement of medicine around the country, there is a parallel electronic record movement of medicine around the country. And all that software will have to be updated. And then I thought, well, that sounds complicated. And then someone brought up reimbursement. The software that controls reimbursement for medicine in this country is as complicated as it is broken in terms of how our healthcare system works. And that is a whole nother hundreds of people in every company that will have to know about and account for and change the systems that work to reimburse insurers, patients, everything else for medicine. All the insurance companies are going to have to change all of their software. And from their point of view, they're probably like, why do I have to do this? Like all the
Right.
pharmacy software inventory products are going to have to change to account for this. Like everything that touches medicine or healthcare is going to have to account for a change of a longer number. It is really a Y2K event. And I see you calling for that level of attention and urgency, and I think that that's right. I don't think you're in any way exaggerating the seriousness of what this change is gonna be like.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, when you think about the width of this thing, all the things that you said, but then you start thinking about, DEA, FBI, anybody that use a pharmacy, anybody that uses National Drug Code, which is really the number for the whole industry, is going to have to change. And so basically, you end up with more similar to what some European countries have, where they have a European number, and then you have the G10 number. So it's going to be an interesting change for the whole industry.
Well, and I'm now just thinking about it. Boards of pharmacy probably have software where they capture incidents having to do with medicines that probably have an NDC-10 code that'll have to change. The FDA will have an adverse events database change because there's probably an NDC that's entered somewhere along there. It's really, gosh, there's no end to it. Tell me, Tencount, given your role in helping roll out DSCSA for everyone from manufacturers to wholesalers to now small dispensers, what are you guys doing to help with the NDC-10 to NDC-12 changeover?
Sure. I mean, early on, we were ready to jump into it and start to figure out what the changes are. And then as we got into this and we started realizing the complexity of it, largely we're in listen mode. We're spending a lot of time in industry groups, talking to our peers, talking to customers, clients. But we're starting to do kind of impact assessments for clients where we go in and we just basically say, okay, let's look at everywhere where NDC number is, right, in your whole organization. And there's some great examples. I think this is public. I think a large manufacturer, I'll just say, published some information through GS1 where they actually did an analysis. I mean, it was like 150 plus systems in their infrastructures. So that's the first kind of thing you want to do is figure out, okay, where is everywhere where NDC is, and then you're going to have to basically put together a team to start figuring out, okay, what we have to assemble a program to start structuring what the changes are like, what's the budget, what's the timeline. The hard thing is going to be when you get into, I mean, there's a lot of hard things, but one of the hardest things is going to be the conversion that needs to happen. So just like with DSCSA, where we had, some serialized and non-serialized product, you're going to have some product that's NDC-10 while you're moving in NDC-12 product. So there's going to be this duality period that's going to be challenging. But the key thing is the industry needs to start talking and working together. And I am encouraged. I know GS1 is doing a lot of work in this area. HDA, I think there's a few other entities out there that are doing kind of exploratory work. So, and definitely talk to your trade groups. I think that's the key thing is, go to wherever part of the industry you're in, find your trade group and say basically, hey, what are we doing about this? And if you don't have a trade group, then, go to GS1 and say you want to be a part of those work groups to really start getting the information and the conversations going.
Well, and call Tencount. People should be calling
Absolutely.
you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go to tencountconsulting.com. We're happy to talk to you and help understand where you're in the supply chain, what's going on. If it's in an area that we're not handling, like especially in the payments side of the house, like we're going to bring in partners and experts for those kind of things, but we will definitely help you figure out how to navigate through the maze. That's the big thing.
Super exciting. Also super terrifying as Y2K was. I was on Wall Street when that happened, and there was no small amount of white knuckling through that date.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. There was a lot of, and then I think the big lesson from Y2K was like, there is a lot of fear, but you got to get to the reality. I was on the consulting side in those days too. I was doing a lot of warehousing systems and such. And we were finding systems that would have shut down if we didn't do changes. So, the good thing is those things got caught and changed and fixed, and it really became a non-event. So, there is going to be some sense of hype, and in some ways it's needed. You kind of need that motivational fear of the reality of what this thing is to get the right attention so that we get the right people in the room. This has got to be the whole industry together, figuring out how to approach this whole thing together.
Well, I feel like it's a little bit self-correcting. If you haven't converted your systems to NDC-12, you won't get reimbursements, you won't get paid, you won't be able to ship
Yeah.
product. That seems like it's got a built-in stick.
Yeah, it does. And I think I'm always looking for silver linings. One silver lining in this is there is a lot of challenges in NDC numbers in itself. There's different formats without getting into all the details of it that compromise that, that comprise that 10-digit format. And that in itself has caused a lot of challenges and problems and errors. So I think going to this uniform format has been a long time coming. So, once we cross over this bridge, so to speak, I think it's actually going to resolve some issues that may have been even invisible to some of the supply chain and hopefully help with transparency and accuracy and all those things, which hopefully impacts cost. That's what we're all looking to do, is try to do this better, faster, cheaper.
Thank you, Mark, for coming on the PSM podcast today. Tell us where people who are interested in either small dispenser DSCSA work or NDC-12 work can find you and your partners at Tencount Consulting.
Absolutely. For just training, come to DSCSA.learningcart.com. That you're going to have the different levels of training, and we have a free course out there. So if you don't even understand what DSCSA is, go there, get the code, take it for free, or go to tencountconsulting.com as our main website. And we're always happy to give you a free consultation to see if we can help you or understand what your challenges are.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Shabbir. Appreciate what you do.